So when we're kind of like at the end of our like rope, when we're like exhausted, we're like in a much more formative state than we realize. And again, talk about what stories are we living towards? What story are we like forming in our mind? If we're just constantly like, ultimately, like we're just actually trying to escape our story and our reality to embrace some made up one, or in some cases, maybe a true one if it's a documentary or whatever. But like, you know, a made up one to just get us through a couple hours so then we can go to sleep and, you know, just be like, well, start it all over again. And, you know, that's not, there is like, some, like, you know, so for like my wife and I currently, like we do, we watch a show and it's like this moment of like, cool, we actually get to watch a show together. This is exciting. You know, we have 2 little kids. It doesn't happen super often. And, but what's funny is when we're intentional about it, it's like, oh, this is life-giving. And we've actually even seen with our 3-year-old daughter that like her personality is not as fun when she expects and wants to watch TV all the time. She's a much more of a hassle. And so we just started this rhythm where it's like, hey, we only watch TV when it rains. And so the other day it rained and she was like, Daddy, it's raining. And she knew right away. She literally like, it started raining and she like, something in her knew. And she's like, it's raining. I'm like, you're right. Let's watch a movie. And
that's amazing.
She knew right away. But now she's like,
just don't move to Seattle.
Yeah, true. We're not ready for like the summer of Drenchburg, right? It's working right now, whereas I'm not ready to get to
change it up.
All that to say, like, it's just like we're not actually living into what lives or even dealing with the stuff that we have. And so the stuff that we're going through. And so it just becomes a distraction from actually wrestling. And I even think too, if someone who's going through a really hard season, like if we choose to go to entertainment or maybe even work or maybe even, but whatever, it might be even something in itself good, but we're going to that thing over maybe choosing to have a moment of silence with God. What we're doing is we're actually like robbing God of the opportunity to care for us in a hard moment, you know? So like I have kids. When my daughter Eden falls, like I would want her to come to me. I wouldn't want her to be like, oh, well, you know, I need to go down the slide now and make myself feel better momentarily because, you know, like I don't want to go to my dad. I want to just go to this fun thing. I'd be like, no, come to me. I want to take care of you. And, you know, I've told the story a couple different times on different platforms, but Cal Newport, he wrote a book called Digital Minimalism, and he talks about a story of Martin Luther King Jr. when he's kind of at his breaking point early on in his kind of justice movement, where he'd just been arrested. He'd falsely arrested. He's going like 3 miles over the speed limit, and he was receiving tons of persecution. And he was like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? Is this even worth it? And he's kind of at the end of his rope, and he comes home from just getting out of jail for the first time, and is like, that's like a crazy traumatic experience. And he sits down and it's late at night and he makes himself a coffee and he sits at his table and he just prays. And for those of you who are familiar with this story, that's the moment where God is like, Martin Luther, you stand up for justice, you stand up for righteousness, and I will be with you, you know, all the days of your life. More or less, I'm kind of butchering that, what God said to him in that moment. But it was this moment of like, you stand up to this, like God meets him, is like, you're going to do this. And that was the moment that he planted the rest of his life on. You know, when it got even way worse, he came back to that moment. And Cal Newport just kind of brings us up this question of like, what would have happened if Martin Luther King had an iPhone or if he had Netflix? It's like, what would have happened? Like, would that have been it? It's just like, you know what? I'm just going to pop on a show. Yeah. Instead, he's this deeply informative encounter. And my guess is it's probably a regular rhythm for him to sit down and pray. You know, probably a regular habit. And so if our habits go towards just distracting ourselves, then we miss out on what God might have for us. But if we have a constant habit of like, you know, 9 times out of 10 I went to go pray, nothing happened. Well, that 10th time God met me, like that was probably worth that continual habit. And the more that habit becomes, the more that habit is sustained over time, the more likely it is for you to have those encounters, like those formative encounters.